Hey guys, it's the Melblade5, and I know I just said that I didn't want this channel to become an anime channel, despite the fact that I'm making 2 anime videos in a row. This will probably be the most anime YouTuber-like video I'll ever make, with it effectively being a video essay, but it's on a subject matter that has really bugged me for some time. In the past, I had seen very few anime, but in 2017, I took it upon myself to watch more, and have seen a greater number since then. Those include, in order of watching, My Hero Academia, Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains, Fairy Tail, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in the Dungeon, and more recently, Goblin Slayer and Zombieland Saga. However, most of the anime I've watched have been a part of the Isekai genre, as the otakus call it. Those being No Game No Life, Konosuba, Overlord, That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, ReZero, and more recently, The Rising of the Shield Hero and Saga of Tanya the Evil. After watching these shows, really enjoying them, and seeing an abundance of Myth and Roid songs, I guess I'm Isekai trash, as they say. That is because the Isekai genre is universally panned by the internet, with everybody saying that they are terrible. But today, I want to present my counter-arguments, as I believe that isekais are not bad. Just hear me out first, and then decide if you want to take my point seriously or not. I know that all the isekais I've watched are widely praised by the anime community, so I may be just really lucky, but whenever I see a video talking about these shows, they always say, yeah, isekais suck, but this one's different. Like it's a mandatory requirement. But with there being a good number of isekais that are good themselves, is it really fair to say that? So to those who may not know, an isekai, taken from the Japanese word for another world, is a work of Japanese fiction where the plot involves the main character being from the real world and getting transported to another world. One of the most common criticisms I hear of isekais is that they are overdone. And I will admit that is true, but that doesn't apply to just Japan. It's an overdone genre everywhere. I remember reading some books when I was very young that were pretty much isekais. Maybe I got into those because I wanted to escape my shitty life? So possibly me watching a lot of isekai shows have some deep-rooted psychological reason behind it? Anyway, while it is overdone, I don't think that should be used as a reason to say the entire genre is bad, because there are plenty of overdone genres that people still think are good. Superhero movies are so frequent nowadays, but I don't hear people saying they suck due to how common they are. Another common criticism, and the one that I see the most, is to do with the most famous isekai, Sword Art Online. I've never seen Sword Art Online, so I'm not going to say whether it's good or bad, and I'm not judging anybody for their opinions on it. Every big anime YouTuber constantly mentions how bad SAO is, resulting in them and many other people judging the isekai genre solely from SAO's quality. A lot of the time when I hear how bad isekais are, I see SAO used as the prime example. While the series has the most notoriety due to the sheer popularity of the anime and light novels, I think it's incredibly unfair to say an entire genre sucks because its most famous work is apparently bad. It's also ignoring the fact that the isekais I've watched, and in turn all the ones everybody says are good, aren't that far behind SAO in terms of popularity. For instance, I sometimes see this list of the top 10 best-selling light novels in Japan in 2017, which has SAO at number 1. Well, Konosuba is in 2nd, ReZero in 3rd, and Overlord and Tanya the Evil are at 9th and 10th respectively. I tried looking at some more up-to-date lists, but couldn't find any from reliable sources. Sword Art Online is also used as a major example for the third and final common criticism I hear of the genre, which is that it's full of cliches. Examples of these cliches include the main character being overpowered, the main character having a harem of girls that are all in love with him, and the main character, or sometimes characters in general, being bland. Yeah, a lot of these are to do with the main character. However, every genre has its own cliches, and all forms of media are often criticized for just using basic cliches and being unoriginal. I don't see why isekais have to be singled out and are treated like they are the only genre that does this. I honestly believe that cliches aren't a bad thing in stories, depending on how they're used. The main reason why all the isekais I've watched are praised is because they do something different and put a spin on typical isekai stories. Which again, all forms of media are often praised for being unique anyway. But some of them also use those cliches, except for the bland characters one, and use them very well in my opinion. I feel like so many people negatively judge isekai shows simply for being isekais without giving them a chance. It's a classic case of judging a book by its cover. Or I guess to be more accurate, judging a book by reading the first line of the synopsis on the back. Because the actual isekai part of the story is at the beginning, and is rarely brought up again aside from the main character occasionally making references to the real world. When you get past that very beginning part, I believe that's when the story's true merits are shown, and that's what it should be judged on, not that it's an isekai. So for the majority of this point onwards, I'll be going through each of the isekais I've watched and talk about why I at least think they're good, what they do differently, and what cliches they have when applicable to further push that point across. In No Game No Life, everything in Discord revolves around games, with conflict being physically impossible, meaning that all the struggles in the series have to be solved with brains. To top it all off, the bets of these games are upholded by being magically enforced to maintain stakes. Additionally, there are a wide variety of games involved, from already existing to completely original ones, and even existing games but with a twist to keep things interesting. It also utilizes a slightly less mentioned cliche of isekai to an extent, which is wish fulfillment, as Sora and Shiro are massive shut-ins who never go outside due to agoraphobia, and being transported to another world is used as an allegory for escapism, which is a theme I think is utilized very well. It also helps to characterize Sora and Shiro like how they make many video game and anime references, plus they have obvious character flaws due to their social awkwardness. Even though the series does do some questionable things, they're mostly stuff that I can look past, in which the unique and creative twist with the games, the fun characters and their dynamics, and many endearing moments is what made me enjoy this series. For Konosuba, the difference is that the main characters are underpowered. Kazuma's luck is all he really has going, but it gets cancelled out by his party of a useless goddess, an explosion-obsessed mage that can only use one spell a day, and a masochist that can't hit anything. Kazuma is also a very different kind of protagonist, as he's often pessimistic and a bit of an asshole due to constantly getting screwed over by his party's actions. But as I've said in the past, the main draw of Konosuba is that it's a comedy, which rightfully deserves that title. It is hilarious with all the crazy antics that the party gets thrown into, yet somehow are able to succeed on occasion. As I've also said before, despite the party, but mostly Kazuma, being jerks to each other, they're still friends at the end of the day, which I think helps add to the comedy as it shows it's not done in a completely mean-spirited way. Along with their funny character traits, that is precisely why I refer to them as lovable losers. If it can raise the spirits of a miserable sod like me, then it's doing something right. With Overlord, its spin on the genre is that the protagonist is the villain of the story. Well, in the first two seasons, Ainz is more of an anti-hero, but in season 3 he goes full-on villain, which, according to Watch Mojo, apparently made a bunch of people quit the show. Oh, he also becomes Dio. I think that Ainz is an incredibly well-written villain, as his descent into evil comes as a result of him losing his humanity and empathy towards humans from his transformation into a lich. It also doesn't help that he was kind of thrown into the villain role by circumstance. Plus, when some of the good guys are actually horrible people, it makes morality not so black and white. This series adopts the overpowered main character cliche, as Ainz is ridiculously overpowered, with the other residents of Nazarick not too far behind. But as Ainz is ultimately the bad guy, this cliche is flipped on its head. Additionally, the potential for people to stand up to Ainz has been shown. Even with Ainz being a villain now, I still like his character, as he isn't completely soulless due to his nerdy inner thought persona and the love he has towards the Nazarick residents. So I'd honestly be okay with him taking over the world. As for that time I got reincarnated as a slime, the whole reason why I wanted to watch this show before it came out was because the premise reminded me of Konosuba. The main character dies, and things don't go as one would hope upon reaching the other world. He's a slime now. This series does have a lot of comedic moments like Konosuba, but also has a lot of sad and wholesome moments as well. It has a wide range of tones to switch between. I see this show as a bit of a weird fusion between Konosuba and Overlord, partially due to Rimuru being overpowered. However, the cliche is done differently here as well, since Rimuru often fights as a last resort, and sometimes his fights are played for comedic purposes. Plus, like in Overlord, there are characters that can stand up to, or possibly even surpass Rimuru, like Milim, and by extension, the rest of the Demon Lords. The Otherworld is presented as a standard fantasy or RPG-like setting for the most part, which I believe is another isekai cliche, although I could be wrong. When some of your main character's final words are, "Destroy my hard drive!" I knew I was gonna like him. And Rimuru's motivation of carrying out Shizu's last wish is part of what makes him a really likable protagonist to me. And that's not even going into the colorful cast of his nation. ReZero's unique spin is that life in the other world is pretty shit for our main character, as Subaru dies over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Subaru's constant suffering helps to differentiate aspects of his character from other protagonists, as, for example, in the second arc of Season 1, he goes mentally insane from the trauma and pain of repeatedly dying, as well as all the fucked up shit he'd seen in his previous lives, I guess. But he is saved from his insanity thanks to Rem. Best girl. This series is a massive roller coaster ride of emotions because there are quite a few uplifting parts, but then it almost immediately drops into horror and despair as Subaru has to suffer more. This is backed up by the fact that Subaru has next to no abilities outside of Return by Death, making him virtually powerless, which further distinguishes him from the other protagonists, and adds to all the shit he has to go through. Outside of Subaru, though, there are plenty of interesting and mysterious characters. I mean, I even like Amelia. Although it can get repetitive to see the same events occur many times, and the basic foundations of the plot are unclear, which were my only notable issues with the anime. The twist in Saga of Tanya the Evil is not only that, like with Overlord, the protagonist is evil, it's literally in the title, but also that the other world is shown to be a horrible place as it's in a World War I style conflict, with the main character getting killed and being reborn in this world as essentially a little girl version of Hitler, or Monica Rial's true form, give or take. They constantly paint the other world in such a negative light to the point that they might as well say, War. War never changes. Except now we have little girls and magic. Tanya has to suffer from the effects of this war firsthand as both a soldier fighting against the world, and due to Being X, who may or may not be God, repeatedly interfering in her attempts to survive. You could arguably say that this series uses the overpowered main character cliche as well, because Tanya's abilities greatly exceed that of the other mages in her battalion, once again due to Being X's interference. But the difference in this case is that Tanya is practically forced to utilize these powers against her will as a ploy for Being X to make her believe that he's God. I've never been interested in war movies, but I guess throwing magic in there and having some explosive action scenes does the trick for me. Now on to the most recent show, The Rising of the Shield Hero. I love this show so far. It's so good! I'll probably give it its own video in the future, but for right now, what this show does differently is that everybody hates the protagonist, as Naofumi is falsely accused of rape by this bitch, and the entire world treats him horribly. As someone who was falsely accused of punching a girl in secondary school and treated like shit because of it, I strongly relate to Naofumi's struggle, even though his case is far more serious, and despite many people who act like false accusations never happen. Naofumi becomes very antisocial and untrustworthy of others due to the way he's being treated, which sets his character apart from the other protagonists, but thankfully he is brought out of this pit of despair thanks to the kindness and support given to him by Japan's redesigns of Mordecai and Rigby. I mean, Raphtalia and Philo. The character dynamics are what really sell this show for me. I love the interactions between Naofumi, Raphtalia, and Philo, as the latter two effectively saved his life from a mental standpoint, and their standing up for Naofumi helps bring out his kind nature he had prior to being accused. At the point the anime is currently at, Naofumi is gradually progressing towards becoming overpowered, but this is due to the Curse series skills he unlocked from all the hatred he has for the world, which he has to control to prevent hurting those he cares about. I'm just scratching the surface of what I love about Shield Hero, which is surprising considering I hate like half the characters in this show, but I'll move on to avoid this dragging. So as you can see, what makes these stories good in both my eyes and most of the anime communities is the writing, characters, and so on. Likewise, the isekais they hear are mediocre at best are criticized for those same things being done poorly. This is what I mean when I say isekai should be judged on what comes after the initial getting transported to another world part, rather than being part of the genre. because that's where the quality of the series is truly defined. It's a bit like what Batman says in Batman Begins. It's not who I am, but what I do that defines me. A thing about isekais that I think are good is that it's like a chameleon genre. Since isekai isn't really a genre, I've just been referring to it as one because everyone else does. It's a story element that can be attached to other genres to create a lot of variety. Ironically, for the genre that is referred to as stale. Just going over the ones I've seen, we have fantasies, dark fantasies, comedy, and war, which further pushes the fact that there is more to these series than just being isekais. Oddly enough, the isekais I hear are bad are the ones everybody forgets about, except for Sword Art Online, depending on your view of it. While the ones I've seen are the ones everybody remembers and leave a lasting impression given their sheer level of popularity and online presence. Other genres have standards that are generally set by their most iconic, memorable, and influential works. So why should isekais be any different and defined by the works people forget? I believe that isekais as a whole aren't bad because I think these series and any other popular ones should be the ones that set the standard for the genre rather than the bad ones. There could even be other good isekais out there that I just don't know about. All I'm getting at is, if you see an isekai that remotely piques your interest, you should give it a chance and see what it has to offer before deciding whether you like it or not, rather than assuming it's going to be bad because it's an isekai. Admittedly, I have once thought of an isekai story myself that is essentially a trapped-in video game plot like Sword Art Online, but the protagonist is a socially awkward, hardcore gamer that makes a lot of game references and terms, but also has suicidal thoughts and hates the real world, so uses video games and in turn the other world as an escape from reality. If I became a writer, not that I'm planning to, and released that story, I'd imagine it would get tons of backlash just for the premise alone. So in the future, I personally think we should stop treating isekais like they're this awful genre that nothing good can come out of, cause that clearly isn't the case. Maybe then it could possibly encourage more people to make good and original isekai stories and allow the genre to flourish. We already have a random crossover show, now we just need a crossover fighting game and we're all set.